Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Two Cities podcast. I'm your host, Theo Howard. Today is the 9th of February, the fifth Sunday after Epiphany, and the feast of Saint Apollonia. And this evening, I am very pleased to be joined today by Mr. John Farrell. Mr. Farrell, welcome to the Two Cities podcast.
Thank you, Theo. I don't know much about Saint Apollonia. Maybe you can give us a little bit about it. Is it a he or a her? It's a her. It's got to be.
Yes, indeed. She was a martyr, I think a virgin martyr, persecuted under one of the Roman persecutions. I think she had an agonizing death, having her teeth pulled out. So typically she's depicted with some tongs and teeth.
Right. So on that note, I generally tell people, if you think your marriage is hard or you're having a hard time, think of the life of the saints, and without a doubt, they all say, "I wish I could have suffered more." In other words, just fight to keep that perspective always, and that's the hard part because there's so much coming at you from no, we have a pill for that now, that suffering, etc. I am happy that you reached out to me because I have stumbled across some some good information. It's only the future of Western civilization that in the balance here, because it's the definition of marriage. Okay. And it's not info that's easy to get, but because it's carefully guarded by the status quo, you can't have that anymore. And so marriage, as you know, the statistics is kind of at a free fall. So I started talking about that. And then I got on our friend,
Tim Flanders.
Thank you. I like him on his show. And then we started talking a bit and then you saw me, but, when you asked me to come on and you had a series of questions and a general overview, I thought, sure, that sounds great. Let's talk about that, because the definition of marriage right now is an eclipse and is virtually unavailable, so that people who want to get married are sort of flying blind and basically set up for failure. Okay. And I'm going to try to break that down and make it very easy to understand, super basic, because marriage, the Catholic faith is easy. It is simple. It is logical. It's not very complex, but it can be hard, right? So that's what I'm going to get at.
Mr. Farrell hosts a YouTube channel, Annulment Proof. There will be a link in the description below, and the blog As the Annulment Turns. Now, this channel is principally about the temporal sphere and the laity's mission to conform the temporal sphere to Christ the King. The family is the fundamental cell of society, and marriage is the sacrament that constitutes the Christian family. So the contemporary annulment crisis, which we're going to be speaking about this evening, is very much at the heart of the laity's difficulties today, and the crisis in the church, one particularly acute way in which the crisis in the church is felt among the laity and among many families. Just to situate our discussion for our listeners here, we can look at the statistics with the number of annulments granted annually in the United States, which soared from 338 in the year 1968 to 28,918 in 1974, peaking at 63,933 in 1991. By 2004, the number had fallen to 46,330, and then by 2007, 35,009. Not only do 1 in 2 Catholic marriages in the United States end up in divorce, at least in that time period, but 1 in 5 is officially annulled, with 90% of the demands for annulment being successful. Now, this is a mixed picture. I think that's really important to communicate. Of course, the United States is not the only country in the world. It has 5.9% of the world's Catholics, but it accounts for nearly 60% of the Church's 58,322 declarations of nullity in 2007. If we compare that to the years 1952 to 1956, before the Second Vatican Council, there were 392 annulments granted by the Catholic Church worldwide. On the other hand, Africa, which has 14% of the world's Catholics, accounts for a mere 0.9% of the Church's declarations of nullity. So we'll get into maybe the different ecclesial discipline or lack of discipline in various churches around the world and the different cultures. And this all pertains to the modernist revolution with regard to the definition of marriage. And this is what has been so harmful to the laity. In 2014, Francis Bergoglio gave a very striking comment where he said that he believed that 50% of Catholic marriages are not valid.
He said the overwhelming majority. Yes.
The overwhelming majority, even worse, yes. He said it's provisional, and because of this, the great majority of our sacramental marriages are null, because they say yes for the rest of my life, but they don't know what they are saying, because they have a different culture. They say it, they have goodwill, but they don't know, end quote. And then when he gave another one of his scandalous comments with regard to couples living in sin, he said, I've seen a lot of fidelity in these cohabitations, and I am sure that this is a real marriage. They have the grace of a real marriage because of their fidelity, but there are local superstitions, etc. So we see here the classic modernist confusion with the destruction of form and definitions. So we're going to explore how this state of affairs has come about and how someone like Bergoglio can actually, in a certain sense, be consistent with his own modernism in making such an observation as to why he would believe that if he's going to follow the modernist definition of marriage. So, Mr. Farrell, perhaps we can begin then with the philosophical currents of personalism, which began to arise in the early 20th century, and how there was a greater pressure felt throughout the legal system, the canonical system.
Sure. I call Dietrich von Hildebrand the father of gay marriage. That guy got it all rolling with marriage is love, but it's the reason why theology of the body and love and responsibility are super long and kind of make your head spin is because they multiply. He multiplies words only to say procreation is secondary. That's all that book does, but it takes a long time to get there. Okay. So, the pressure, there's a lot of love in the room in the 20th century. The pressure was for contraception. You had Margaret Sanger come out and say procreation is secondary. Then you had the Anglicans come out and in 1930 approving contraception and for the first time saying baby production is a duty. Okay. That's never been said in the history of Christianity until 1930 because increase and multiply is a blessing. It is nature. But now it has become a duty, like going to mass is a duty because it's a precept. No, the birds and the fish do not receive a precept. Neither do we when it comes to increase and multiply. It's just nature. All right. So with all that pressure, Pius XII just knuckled under and approved. He says procreation is primary except when it's not. Therefore, he didn't use the word NFP, but he got the NFP rolling in 1951 with his fallible statement, his fallible speech to the Italian midwives. So this is the underpinning of the problem with the definition of marriage, why it cannot no longer be defined. But as you were talking, I got a lot of things to say, but the one question I have for you to try to focus in on this so that's not a lot of my opinion and your opinion and my view and his view and all that stuff. What is the primary reason for the annulment explosion in the USA? We're the annulment capital of the world, hands down, by like a long ways. What is the primary, how did that happen? What is the primary cause to facilitate that annulment revolution? Do you know?
I find it hard to identify a primary cause because America already in the early 20th century exhibited a divorce culture in the Protestant atmosphere or secular Protestant atmosphere,
right.
Unique among Western nations. There was already a secular pressure behind divorce, and there was a culture of sort of Hollywood romanticism as well.
Right. Yes. Marriage is it's a private affair. Totally. Yes, sir. Love and marriage go together. You can't separate that. There's so much Hollywood behind Humanae Vitae. Okay. There's a lot of points to be made. I'll go ahead and answer my own question. Okay. The cause is the change from the right over the body to the right over the self. The change is the legal definition of the object of consent being changed. Rights and duties of marriage are enumerated and finite. Not anymore. After you make NFP licit, you are now creating a new nature, a new natural purpose to the conjugal act. Nature had one purpose, reproduction, but now nature has, you've heard this, the twofold purpose. Now we have a twofold purpose. So the cause of the annulment revolution isn't we have more computers or we have more people or we change the rules. No, it is we have a new object of consent.
But isn't that the same? Sorry, isn't that the same across the world? Why, particularly in America, has there been such a stark increase?
Okay, I'll answer that. So, just like communion in the hand got started in the Netherlands, well, so did the annulments get started in the Netherlands. The annulment revolution started there, and it was Cardinal Staffa from the Apostolic Signatura. He came out and said, "You guys knock this off. You cannot start doing all these annulments based on the communion of life or the good of the spouses being the essence of marriage. Procreation alone is the essence. What needs to be defined is finite and enumerated. But when you make my love to the moon and back part of the definition, the legal definition, A, it's no longer natural. B, it has no legal status, no definition. So that's why annulment is on demand for any reason you want, as long as the marriage breaks down. So they got started in the Netherlands. Staffa comes out and says, no, the answer is no, you can't do any of this. And of course, just like communion in the hand, it jumped over to the USA and they were off to the races in the 70s. And the United States is independent and nothing gets in our way, and we have a workaround for everything. So we became the annulment capital of the world because, by golly, we if we want to get it done, we get it done. So when there's a loophole, we take it, and that's kind of what happened. But the only reason it was anywhere it was allowed is because like I said, that the legal object of consent is changed. Natural family planning holds the definition of marriage hostage at gunpoint right now. You can't have NFP licit and have a legal definition of marriage at the same time. That doesn't work. This is why you're like, what's wrong with marriage? What are we going to do? How can we make things better? More marriage prep, more this, more that. No, because you have to say procreation alone is the natural purpose, the essence, the legal essence. That's what primary means. Primary is independent. The secondary is dependent on the primary. That's all out the window now. Mm-hmm. Even Cardinal Burke will say the secondary ends are essential. He'll look you in the face and say that. No, because he's done the annulments. So while I'm thinking about it, there's a rule of thumb. If you had kids, it's valid. Your annulment is valid. Your marriage is valid if you had capacity, if you had kids. One needed capacity. Let's see, the contract is for the right over the body, perpetual and exclusive right over the body for acts suitable for the generation of children. But now the acts must be suitable for an emotional bond, an emotional, so this is why consummation was just the conjugal act, but the new code, it is in a human manner, which means we have to have some deep soul connection, like the cover of a romance novel, perpetually, kind of like that. So now you've taken what was objective, a conjugal act with a body, and you've created a subjective nature, which is a new nature. This is why NFP violates nature, just like contraception does. But no one can let go of licit NFP. Almost nobody. The church does not teach it. The church has given lip service to it, but that's not teaching. A pope saying something isn't teaching per se. This is why why we cannot solve marriage, because you cannot get subjectivity out of the legal definition. You cannot consent to what is subjective, because marriage is rights and duties. And if you cannot enumerate and define those, you can't consent to it. Therefore, you can unconsent to it at any time, aka annulment. So while I was talking, the wheels in your mind were moving a little bit. What do you have to say?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to the essence there, and I'd like to come on to that, the changing essence of law in the conciliar church, the abandonment of objectivity in favor of subjectivity. But just go back to Pius XII here, because I've been examining on this channel some of the compromises made by the pre-conciliar popes, which helped to lay the ground for the conciliar revolution. You mentioned about Pope Pius XII having a sort of polyphonic approach with regard to marriage. So in 1944, in De Finibus Matrimoni, he condemned the inversion of the ends of marriage. So it's not as if any of this was even in question. It's a bit like Humanae Vitae raising the question as if there was a question. But the prohibition on on birth control is at least at the level of authority of the universal ordinary magisterium. So these modernists who even raise the question are doing grave harm to souls, and that seems to belie the malintent behind that.
Not until after Vatican II did it make its way in. Correct. But in Pius XII's time, no. But there was a lot of Christopher Wests running around. Okay, Dietrich von Hildebrand was one of the first, but there was others. You know, like I said, the 20th century was when love, quote unquote, was knocking at the door of the legal definition of marriage. And who can say no to love? Okay. And there's all this, like I said, all this pressure, political pressure. You've got to go be like the Protestants. We need to come up with something, because women aren't just baby factories. I know it says they will be saved through childbearing, but we don't get me started. There's so much that's gone on. Okay. So you wanted to talk more about Pius XII though a little bit. Primary, essential. That's it. Secondary is dependent on the primary. All right, all you Christopher West prototype knuckleheads out there, knock it off. You're going to create. It's a revolutionary error to let this stuff in. You can't do it. Okay, so he's got all that straight. Then in 1951, he comes out with the midwives' speech and effectively says, it's a violation of, not effectively, he says this, marriage or procreation is primary except when it's not. Okay. And he'll say it's a grave sin against the nature of marriage, except for grave cause, which is a complete violation of Casti Connubii 20 years earlier, which says no reason, however grave, can you violate nature. So he's saying, so what you have now is if neither fish nor fowl. You have Pius XII just goofs up majorly because he's saying marriage is nature, procreation is primary, unless you're having a really hard time of it, then we're going to bend the rules for you. And everyone's like, wow, that sounds so compassionate. Kind of like for abortion for rape or incest, okay? And now the Mormons are doing that. Just pray to your pastor about your abortion, okay? So it's the same, it's a little wedge in the door. Now you have, it was all obviously pre-internet, so people couldn't check all this stuff, but they're like, it was, pay, pray, and obey. So people are like, well, the Pope said this. Then the rhythm method, which had been suppressed or condemned, you can't stop. Once fire gets out of the fireplace, you can't stop this stuff. People want their Catholic contraception, and you're not getting in that way. Okay. So, and the feminism just bit on it real hard. Now you've got this problem though, because the code says the orientation of the, oh shoot, let me turn that off. The orientation of the act toward procreation. That means the direction of where the arrow is pointing. You can only orient your car one way at a time. Okay. So the orientation is toward procreation. You must intend procreation. But now we have two orientations. One is to have a baby and the other is to not have a baby. Those are obviously conflicting orientations, but we're going to call them both natural. So what do we do with that problem? Okay. enter Vatican II, we just start calling marriage a compact of conjugal love in Gaudium 48. Now you have, and who wants to say no to love? Raise your hand. I didn't think so. That's where love wins comes from. Love wins the legal argument. So, of course, the feminists and the homos take off on that. But to answer your question, this is why no one can touch this today. It got buried underground in 1965, and no one can touch. No, it's the Area 51. You not allowed to go in there. It's barbed wired off with a heavily guarded area. This is why I'm like, I smell a rat. I'm going to find out what's going on here. So I tunneled under and I found some stuff, and I barely escaped. And now I'm blocked everywhere. You can't. There's nobody who's in the in crowd who will talk to me at all. No way. When the USCCB came to my town, I went to go meet them. The security was waiting for me. My archdiocese blocks my phone number. They call security if I come by. And maybe my own home parish blocks my phone number.
So how's that for fatherly behavior then?
No, it's because the status quo doesn't take any prisoners. Just like when you go to picket you want to pray against an abortion mill in England, they catch you for the thought police catch you. The regime doesn't like this. So anyway, what was I saying? I guess Pius XII and then Vatican II. Now you have a compact of love is the new legal definition. And of course, Vatican II doesn't bind anything that's new. It talks a good game. It sure looks good, but it ain't binding because Pope Paul VI said, none of this is binding unless I say so, and none of it was that was new. So the new definition, though, is a love compact. Therefore, love is the personalist norm. There's the word we were talking about. That's what we're looking for. Personalist norm is like the soil that the tree grows on. You have no personalist norm, you get no tree. Okay, so the tree is dependent on the personalist norm, soil, dirt, foundation. That's the new foundation of marriage. That's the edifice of marriage. The personalist norm, how we feel, okay? Because Jesus, God is love, and the Trinity is a love thing. So it's a Trinitarian love between spouses and all this like Catholic New Age goo, all right? Which is enter theology of the body and love and responsibility. My joke is if you have insomnia, get one of those books and start reading. You just can't. It's okay. So.
It's just rhetoric, isn't it? It's just, as you say, it's putting all of these rhetorical devices and sort of verbosity around a revolutionary
right. Okay. Yes. If that's right. If like there's just euphemisms are everywhere. If you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. If you want to call procreation, if you want to have, I guess, gay marriage and a lot of annulments, we're going to have to call procreation secondary. And so as far as the homo element behind it, that's hard to put your finger on as who's doing what and why. But the only reason we have, quote, gay marriage is because of the idea that family planning can be licit, that you can have a new nature. If nature can change, Bruce Jenner is a girl, and who are you to judge? Okay. So all this gender fluidity and stuff, it's because, and what is a woman? Boy, I don't know, because she can be just as unprocreative as a man naturally. Okay. It's all nature. So law and nature are fixed and they can't go anywhere until NFP. So that's my theme. That's what I'm talking about. It holds the definition of marriage hostage, but it's so institutionalized now, and no one wants to go anywhere. Everyone is basically turned into some version of a Christopher West zombie. You're a little familiar with Christopher West, are you?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So that whole notion, it's all from the University of Steubenville. It's in every marriage and family office in the USA and probably a lot in England. I do my share of dabbling with different canonists and stuff in England, trying to get a little leg or get a little headway, but you still pretty much get shut down because the politics are so heavy. Your name is mud if you're saying what I'm saying, if you have any type of job or ecclesiastical status or anything. It's a non-starter.
The logic of that personalist philosophy can lead to some really bizarre assertions. I've heard West claim before that the sexual revolution happened because Catholics weren't communicating how wonderful sexual passion was to their children.
Hmm.
Just,
He
just,
said a
just
lot of weird stuff.
really, really odd
Get
claims.
odd. You get odd. There's one truth. And if you're not pointed toward truth, it's easy to get odd after a little while.
Mhm.
So if marriage is if the essence of marriage is personalism, then it's kind of how I think and feel and what turns me on. Okay. So how many different types of goat yoga are there? Probably 57 different kinds by now, and they're all getting weirder and weirder. Okay. It's the same kind of thing with this. Your Christopher West just goes off on more and more tangents, and people like that. Then the definition, marriage. Okay, so NFP used to require a grave cause. You've heard that before. Serious cause. Father Ripperger will talk about this. A serious cause. If NFP is natural, you don't need any cause because you're just following the personalist norm. You're just being natural because the purpose of the act is love, and so there's no, you want more of it. It's just nature. So this is why now it's just a lifestyle, and it's deeper and deeper. It's like drug use. You just keep going. You keep going. And who wants to give up their fentanyl? It's like the worst. It's the worst experience to give up fentanyl. Not that I know about it, but I've heard about it. That's why they stay on the street. They can't stop it. And to give this up and to say, then you'll have to admit the so much family breakdown. Pardon me. the amount of annulments. Those are all erroneous judgments. We have broken up the family erroneously. The person you're with now is not really your spouse. Okay. You want to talk about a mess times a million. Okay. We're not going there. This is why God's going to have to fix this. But when you start connecting the dots, and like you were talking about Pope Francis connecting the dots, he is being consistent. If my line is John Paul II created brother and sister living together after adultery, and they gave birth to Amoris Laetitia. I mean, it's just that's the logical conclusion. So if marriage is love, then you can get communion for adultery because you can get communion for divorce because it's just love. There's no contract because rights are finite and enumerated until they're not, because personalist norm is now the foundation, which cannot be defined legally. So marriage has no rights, and divorce offends nothing. When NFP is licit, the condemnation of divorce in the New Testament disappears because there's no the Matthew 19:9 exception clause becomes for invalidity, and so you can separate if you think your marriage is invalid now, and there are no rights and duties, as I said. So there's if car ownership has nothing to do with rights and duties, I think I'm going to take your car because personally I feel like it's better for me than you. So I'm just taking that, and that's just the way it is. And you can pray about that. So after a while, no one has any cars anymore. What do you think's happening to marriage in the West? Same. Let me briefly, while I'm thinking of it, the reason why it's not happening in Botswana or Sri Lanka or Madagascar is because of culture. They all know what marriage is. They also get the whole family involved, and if you try to foment divorce, or if you're part, they cut you off from communion. That's what happens. That's the way it's supposed to. By the way, so like in every diocese in the country before the Beatles, you divorced without permission, no communion for you.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, this is following John Lane, who said that the Novus Ordo is not governed by law, it's governed by bureaucracy, and that the law of the 1917 Code has been replaced by norms, which are not the same thing because they have this fluid application, but also they don't have specific penalties behind them in the 84 Code. And we'll get into this later, but one way to characterize the post-conciliar period is the abandonment of the rule of law, because following St. Thomas Aquinas, if a law does not actually have a sanction attached to it, attached to a transgression of it, then it is no longer an ordinance. So it's no longer actually valid law at all. And that is it. I mean, the underlying theme here is ecclesiastical cowardice before the council as well, the unwillingness to confront the godless modern world. And just to go back to that addictive quality of sexual immorality, this seems to be part of the whole satanic dynamic behind Humanae Vitae, where I think it's Gaudium et Spes sort of tantalizingly just notes some strange observations about new methods of birth regulation. I think it was in 1963-64, leaves it there. John the 23rd establishes a pontifical commission to look at this question of artificial birth control, as if there was a question. Paul VI then expands that to, I think, 70 members of the commission, including cardinals and bishops. And that then, the commission then approves artificial birth control and leaks that to the press. So Catholic pastors across the world are telling the married couples that they can use artificial birth control. About half the Catholic married world is probably using it. They're getting addicted, as you said. And this follows this modernist subjective view of marriage, that the end of marriage is within itself. The good of the spouses.
Marriage is marriage, basically,
within
is the new
conjugal
definition.
union, rather than the objective Aristotelian Thomist view of marriage, where the end of marriage is outside itself. It's social. So in the natural order, it's for the propagation of the human race. And in the supernatural order, it's for the growth of the Catholic Church and for the population of heaven. It's beautiful. But Humanae Vitae, the entire thing is miscast, because it begins with Paul VI talking about a population growth problem. Again, assuming there is a problem following Jewish biologist Paul Ehrlich's population bomb. He said that in the first place, there is the rapid increase in population, which has made many fear that world population is going to grow faster than available resources, with the consequence that many families in developing countries would be faced with greater hardships. There is also the fact that not only working in housing conditions, but the greater demands made both in the economic and educational field pose a living situation in which it is frequently difficult these days to provide properly for a large family. So this is, with Paul Ehrlich's writing The Population Bomb, which he begins by saying the battle to feed all of humanity is over. In the 1970s, hundreds of millions of people will starve to death in spite of any crash programs embarked upon now. So Paul VI here presumes this Kabbalistic notion of Deus abscondita, that God is just going to create the world and abandon it, gives heed to these Jewish fables, which Paul warns Titus against, rather than the God revealed by our Lord as a loving and providing Father.
Sure. And like you said, that if you combine that with the feminist relief that so many women are just tempted, they'll just go for it. I use an example, if you have to put your hand on a hot stove and you're not allowed to move it, and so you'll have to ask for grace to be able to bear it, okay? But if we give you an out, you're going to take your hand off, okay? And this notion of I'll be able to. I don't need to have 14 kids or whatever because that's too much for me, and I can, I'm already maxed out. That's just a classic thing. So this is why there will be no solution to the Catholic birth dearth if NFP is allowed to remain licit. None, because it's always going to get hard. You ever not want to get out of bed in the morning? I mean, it's always hard. You just got to do it. Okay. But if you're told it's holy to not do that, well, sure. Hey, but you pray for grace. There's no atheist in a foxhole. When it gets hard, you need to pray, and that's it. So, but if you know you can have a way out, all you have to do is discern. Boy, I know I need to lose weight, but I'm really discerning. I'm going to eat that other food. I really think God's calling me. Okay. So you're going to have fat people if that's what's going on. You're always going to have a problem with not enough kids if you give them an out. So like I said, once this stuff gets going, it's Katie Bartholomew. I think it was Leo the 13th who said, marriage is great, but once it gets outside the boundaries of the legal definition, Man cannot put it back together. It's gone. And that's exactly what has happened now. However, the good news is none of it is obviously defined infallibly by the church. It's all lip service. It's all not necessarily deception, although there's a lot of wordsmithing going on with Vatican II. A lot. It's wild how, and Paul VI, as you know, is a PhD in he's a doctor in canon law. He knew what he was saying, how he wrote it. He also had a bit of a conscience problem in the end because he's like, what have I done? Basically, he's created this Frankenstein's monster. I heard about that. He was like, man, what did I do? So while I'm thinking of it, he did come out in 1976. Paul VI came out to the Rota and said, marriage exists independently of love. Have you ever heard that before? Have you ever heard him say that before? Did you hear this?
No, I've not.
Okay, so
what Paul VI wouldn't do is enforce the law. So it's all very well sort of throwing up your hands and regretting some of the consequences of your actions. But if you're not actually enforcing the law, the 1917 code, of course, is still the code at this point, then that's a renunciation of authority.
Yeah, because like Trump coming in here, you're going to get serious blowback. If you start to come in and enforce the law or enforce the border or enforce truth, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to scream and yell at that. Now, if you're talking about their marriage validity and their relations, you want to get personal, you want to get fired up. No, you can't stand up to that stuff. So they're like, well, we're going to do our best. Oh, no way, man. I forgot all. Oh, as far as that birth control commission, yeah, the majority of the report, I think it was like 90% of them said basically, if artificial contraception, then natural contraception. Because if the goal is no baby, then go ahead. It's obvious. This is why everyone except Catholics will call it Catholic contraception, because there's no institutional bias with your average Lutheran. They can see it. Okay. So you're right. There was no question there. But if you're going to start saying for grave cause, you can have a new natural legal orientation to your conjugal act, which has never been in the history of Christianity or Catholicism till now, then why not use a little technology? What's the problem? There's no, to be consistent. So all the Catholics said, fine, I'll use contraception. Everyone follows their conscience. So that's the state of things. And now marriage, as you know, is just off a cliff. And there's a lot of people who don't want to do marriage, because especially the guys are like, why would I sign up to a contract with no rights that someone could just take all my stuff at any time? And, especially it's mostly women that do that because they have strong feelings and they just go off. So the solution is to define your contract with finite terms and make sure the other person agrees with those and what the consequences for not living them are, which would be you lose your salvation if you violate the terms of the contract. Mm-hmm. There's your way out. This is why all the Pearl Davises and the people who are saying red pillars and no marriage, that's not good either. They're making a good point, but you have to basically almost like, I don't know, when St. Ignatius started in pagan Europe, he started Catholicism right there with the monasteries and stuff. We have to start marriage over almost self-governing, because your bishop will be like, who, me? What do I have to do with marriage? That's state matter. Okay. Your kids living with you, that's merely civil effects. No. The education rights of your kids is God-given and it's grave, and no one can take away your education rights. That's why you only through ecclesiastical judgment. It's right there in the new code also. But they're saying, no, it's a love contract, so that there's no rights. We're going to call it a covenant, which you've probably heard that whole covenant contract debate. Covenant is Protestant. Covenant is Protestant. That's all there is to it. And So you if you're going to enter a contract with somebody, identify your terms. Just go back before 1950 and you'll find them, and that's it. While I'm thinking of it, the new commentary of canon law 2000. That's like the Bible for all the modern canonists. Okay, maybe you've heard of it. The commentary from 2000. Mm-hmm. Everyone looks at that like, what does canon law X mean? Well, let's look it up. And so if you look in there, it'll say, per the teaching of Vatican II, we gradually started to realize that marriage has more rights now than just the right over the body. Per the teaching of Vatican II, we're realizing that marriage is more than just the right over the body, and that it's the right to that personalist norm. And because procreation is as a discernment, it's no longer nature, it's what you think. Therefore, the new right is. So what I'm saying is, the 2000 commentary ended up saying, we can no longer define these rights. We can no longer, it's impossible for us to enumerate the rights. Okay. That's the problem. Back to the original thing I said. Why is the annulment crisis happening? How come you can't get marriage bound anymore? Because there's nothing to put the lock on, Theo. You need to put a lock on a piece of metal that's hard and cold that doesn't move. But a personalist norm is like the feelings and the hearts in the sky, and there's nothing to put the lock on. So that's the one thing I am saying that I don't think anyone else is saying. The solution to the problem, while we're living in the eclipse of the definition of marriage, the state will not back you up. Your bishop will not back you up. You have to back yourself up, and make sure that you marry somebody that understands that contract. Now, that's a tall order because no one wants to go there. When you're getting married, you want to think about that stuff? No. So it's a perpetual motion machine, creating more and more of this damage, because when everything's great before, and then when stuff hit the rocks, what do? You don't, when did you become an expert in canon law? You're too busy changing diapers and working and taking care of stuff. I mean, come on. So you just go to the quote experts, and doesn't matter whether they're conservative or liberal, they all kind of will admit that marriage is oriented toward good of the spouses, because it says it right there in the new code. You cannot orient the conjugal act to two things at the same time. You have to pick. So the new orientation by default is good of the spouses. That's the new orientation. And if you think kids are good, fine. If you think kids aren't good, that's fine too.
Yes, I'm not sure whether pertinacious heretics retain ecclesiastical office, but that's another question.
No, sorry. That's above your pay grade kind of thing. In other words, if you got the bars on your shoulder, on your sleeve to make judgments about, but yeah, you can. I guess material heretics.
Well, I was just recalling you said 100% of the American bishops are material heretics with regard to mensurate thora divorce. Maybe we could look into that question there, mensurate thora divorce, and how it shows how the church is now, or the ecclesiastics make the church subordinate to the state, which is an inverse of the doctrine of the two swords.
Yeah, I think it was Leo the 13th in Arcanum 23. He said, you cannot separate the contract from the sacrament and give the contract to the state. You can't do that. And because let what God has joined, let not man put asunder. And then in the exception clause for adultery or anything that violates marriage, it's ecclesiastical judgment. After, I guess, the 11th or 12th century, all those, you had to bring your marriage into the church now. That's how it is. So, and then, it was repeated in Casti Connubii 77 and 78. You're an enemy of marriage if you do this. Every bishop in England and in the USA are enemies of marriage because they give the children to the state. That's who owns your kids, according to your bishop, is the state. Not because there are no parents' rights anymore. Because if you say, you've heard of the case of that kid in, I think it was Texas or California, the mom wanted to chemically castrate the little boy to turn him into a girl. And the father's like, no. Okay. Whose rights? Does he have rights over the kids? Education rights? And the church would say that's a state matter. Let the tender mercies of the state judge this. Nope. The only thing that the state has to judge on the marriage is tax filing status. Okay. Who gets the money? Who gets the house? Whose kids are they? That's all a bishop decision, because it must be done in accord with divine law per Canon 1692. So all of that's out the window today, as I said, because marriage has no rights, because it has infinite rights. So you can't put them in a bottle. So if essentially what you have is a high school boyfriend and girlfriend thing, they're going to play house and see how it goes. That's what marriage is today in practice in the West.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
That means there's no law. It's lawless. Right, marriage is lawless.
But then it's not marriage then.
Well, it is in reality, but not in practice. Okay. So in reality, we have like the United States has a southern border, but if before, when President Biden just let everybody in reality, we have no southern border. We are the world. Okay. But and so it's theory versus practice. So when you try to get to the bottom of this or talk to anybody, it's layers and layers of sound bites, training, and decades of people who have adjusted their lifestyle to the new personalist norm. So it's like you're in another planet. You're in the Twilight Zone and you're the weirdo. And you're like, hey, it's kind of like, red pill or blue pill. And you're like, what's going on? How come we're all in the Lego movie here? Go sports team. It's like, hey, where's everybody? They can't see it, or they don't want to see it, and they can't get the information because everyone they turn to says that marriage is love, and it's just a development. And I didn't know. I was trying to figure out, why are all these annulments? What's going on? Then I read a long essay from Dr. William Marshner, the president of Christian College. And I read that article about 77 times. It's long, but it's really good. And he basically was sounding the alarm back in like 1978. He's saying this new code that's going to be, they're trying to change the definition. And that's exactly what happened. And then the whole thing disappeared. And like I said, then I started realizing the connection with the NFP. And that's why virtually nobody can define this thing, is because NFP is holding it hostage. And that's a very unpopular position, but it does hold water and hold air, and it can't be refuted. It just gets ignored. Like I think it was in what's the modernism? Pascendi. In Pascendi, he's like, if you make an erudite argument, you will be met with silence. That's what they do. Campaign of silence.
Dynamic silence.
Yeah. And that's about what's, and I people say, if John, you could write a book about this or something. I keep learning more all the time. So by the time 5 minutes later, I get a new thought, and I look it up, and then I try to I look for interlocutors to test my point. But I'm basically trying to get enough move the needle enough so that, oh, by the way, I'm thinking about it, because we were talking a little about the Super Bowl earlier. Sorry to ramble on you here, but so Harrison Butker, the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, he's going to be playing today. He's off the injured list, but he came out with his speech last year at Benedictine College, and he says there's nothing natural about Catholic birth control. Did you hear that quote of his when he said the speech?
I didn't know.
Yeah. I can't believe he said it. I was like, wow, look what he just said. There's nothing natural. It's like major, big time, and it got swept under the rug. Like no one wanted to talk about it.
Right.
There's nothing. He said the truth. There's not, because nature is not controlling birth. Nature is having kids. That's your orientation. So he effectively said NFP is not natural. Who else in public says that that has any notoriety at all. Zero. No one. No way. So he said it, and I'm trying to get to the guy so I can at least talk to him or something, because he's a VIP. But that was interesting. That was good. This is the only solution to solving marriage is the legal definition. Right now, as I said, there's none. So we've kind of hit that theme a lot, and that's good because it needs to be, because so many people are just they're not sure about it, or they get bad information, and they're in that closed loop of the Catholic twilight zone that we're all in.
Yeah.
And typically, what happens is they'll have marriage problems, and they'll go online and like, what do I do? Okay, so I think it was, if you got to go to the Douay Rheims for a lot of stuff, as you know, Proverbs 18:22 says, "He that keepeth an adulterous wife is foolish and wicked." You have to get rid of your adulterous spouse. This is what you need. This is per Matthew 19:9. If they commit adultery, you put them away. Not divorce, you put them away. But this is in no other Bible. It's just in the Douay Rheims, that particular line, because they don't want you to assert that, because there's no more rights in marriage. So the putting away part no longer applies, and then you just simp harder is the point. This is where the problem comes along. The men are basically taught, just keep on sacrificing more rather than doing the separation. But if they're not told there's a separation option, which they're not today, because most people who get married don't know that when things get bad, you get an ecclesiastical separation. You never heard that when you got married. You're married, right?
Yes.
Okay. An ecclesiastical separation, a church separation court, is something you had never heard about for a while after you were married, right? Did you ever know that existed? But before, you're like everyone else. Nobody knows. You need to know as a spouse that when your spouse does something really bad, don't keep holding on. Don't keep living for better or for worse. If they're doing something against marriage, aka adultery, like Cornelius de Lapide will say, adultery is anything against marriage. They hit you with a golf club. They're doing all sorts of stuff that's just, they're doing heresy, whatever. Blow it up, get it out, separate with the bishop's permission. That's why it says you are a fool and wicked if you don't do that. But you need a vehicle. But right now you're like, well, you just kind of stay together, and it's okay to separate if you want to. There's no separation. There's just an annulment, and so they just go, "I'll just file for an annulment." Then no, they need to know. People need to know that you do need to bring the law into your picture when there's injustice. That's the separation court, which used to exist in your diocese, and the last marriage separation trial in your diocese ended 1968, right in there. That was about it. They're like, let's shut the door on this. No more. Love is in the air. The Beatles says love is all we need. So we're sold on that. No more separation courts. Let the state handle that. Viva Martin Luther. That's what's going on.
And that's where they're heretics. Or one of the ways.
That's one of the ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've given the sacrament to the state. I make the joke, let's outsource confessions to social workers.
Yeah.
Why not? It's fine. It's more efficient, and hey, pre-shortage, no problem.
So Canon 8 of the Council of Trent says, if one saith that the church errs in that she declares that for many causes a separation may take place between husband and wife in regard of bed or in regard of cohabitation for a determinate or for an indeterminate period, let him be anathema. Canon 12, anyone saith that matrimonial causes do not belong to ecclesiastical judges, let him be anathema. That's session 24. Leo XIII in Arcanum, marriage is holy by its own power, in its own nature and of itself. It ought not to be regulated and administered by the will of civil rulers, but by the divine authority of the Church, which alone in sacred matters professes the office of teaching. Third Council of Baltimore, 1884, We command all married persons, they must baptize married persons, they must not go to the civil courts to obtain a separation from bed and board without previously receiving permission from the ecclesiastical authority. Should anyone attempt this, let him know that he incurs the guilt of grave sin and that he is to be punished as the bishop shall decide. So here again, the modern church is utterly prostrate before the state. She prostrates herself. Marriage being created by God, it's anterior to the state. The state has no business there. But just as we saw during COVID, when the bishops, the modern bishops, shuttered the churches and barred access to the sacraments for the faithful, they are completely subservient before Caesar.
It's it's an incestuous relationship, as you probably know, with the money and the politics, and that's a lot of it. I don't pretend to know all of the details, but you're right. For the Americans, the Third Council of Baltimore Decree 126 is still in force today because it's never been abrogated.
But it's not being enforced though. So again, if a law isn't being enforced, then it's no longer an ordinance. No.
Only if it doesn't violate. So a new custom. I think it's Canon 21 or something. There can be a new custom, but only if it doesn't violate divine law, and only if it's reasonable and stuff like that. So you cannot. This is divine law stuff. You cannot take the marriage contract and be your own judge, or have your Aunt Sally be the judge.
No, I agree. I agree. It's divine law. I just meant the principle that law that isn't enforced is doubtful.
No law at all.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm not sure if I recognize the 83 Code of Canon Law.
You're not sure if you recognize it? Help me out with that.
Well, Cardinal Franzelin, who was Pius IX's Peritus at Vatican I, said that the church cannot give laws which are injurious to souls. And I think marriage is one area, or annulments are one area, but there are other areas like communion for heretics. Yeah. So that would seem to me to suggest that the 84 Code of Canon Law,
83.
83. Yeah, that is not law, because law is an ordinance of reason given by him who has care of the community for the common good and promulgated. And if it doesn't fulfill those four conditions, it's an act of violence. The Cardinal Franzelin, other theologians wrote about how dogmatic facts and the well-established doctrine give infallible safety to universal disciplinary laws, which it doesn't seem to be followed by the 83 Code. So that's why I'd probably
tell me a little about that. Okay, tell me. Can you repeat that part about infallible safety? What did you just say?
There is a theological consensus, and I'm just drawing from my notes here. The consensus among theologians in the 19th century was that there was an infallible safety behind the universal disciplinary laws of the church. So the church cannot promulgate harmful laws.
Okay.
So if harmful laws are coming, it's not coming from the church.
Right. So I think it's 1055 or 57. I can't remember. One of those is the one that says marriage is oriented toward good of the spouses. That's just simply not true.
Right. Right.
There's no way to slice it. It's not oriented.
It's a harmful law. Yeah. And it's damaging to the salvation of souls.
Yes. But if you start saying things like, there's no 83 code or whatever, you're kind of dead in the water. You're no longer, you might as well be set of a contest or something. You're not a Catholic anymore type deal. See what I'm saying? It's like people who leave the reservation have no voice anymore. On a tangent, I listened to some Sede give a talk about NFP on YouTube a couple days ago. He was so good, just hitting it out of the park, but he's got no voice because he's got no pope. You know what I mean? It's like that law, that Canon 1057, I suppose it is, that part it's just wrong. But I don't know. I think we can say you can't. By the way, if there is an error or if there is a lacuna, you go back to the previous law to make sense of it. That's how it's always gone. And I think the new code even says that. So like I was kind of getting to this wordsmithing, this is like, beyond expert level wordsmithing that's gone on with the new code and with Gaudium et Spes, Vatican II, excuse me, Humanae Vitae, it's super thick, very difficult to nail any of it down. You have to, and still they kind of have an out clause on almost everything they say. Nope, we didn't say that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So the 83 code is legitimate. It's Catholic. It's legal. But where it says something wrong, I suppose it's not. Or you can just say the marriage is oriented secondarily to the good. It's silent on primary, secondary. People have said that before, but you can only have one orientation. You just can't.
I don't have the answers to these big questions about the crisis of the church. I'm just posing the questions, and with regard to the passion the church is going through and where true authority is and so on. As you said earlier, it's above my pay grade. I don't know. I mean, John Paul II said that the new code is the legislative embodiment of Vatican II. And in 1984, Archbishop Lefebvre called the new code another grave problem undermining the church, and that the new code of canon law is very serious, for it goes much further than the council itself, institutionalizes the errors of the council. So
mm-hmm. He's right, but still none of it is, the church doesn't err. The church is infallible. The church, right. So we can always bank on that. Like, therefore, if it looks like the church is saying something wild, they're not saying it officially. They're not teaching it. They're just getting in front of a microphone or a pen and promulgating weird stuff. Mm-hmm. That's it. So you have to be kind of smart about it. It's like, always just go back to what they said before. And all of this is new. And like I said before, it all rises or falls on the orientation of the conjugal act. And man has forever, starting with Onan, tried to reorient his conjugal act. People are highly motivated. Mm-hmm. So they're going to do anything they can to get this done. And so if we can hold our mouth just the right way and make it work through Vatican II, you got nothing to say to me, buddy. That's what we're doing, okay? And so while I'm thinking of it, you mentioned Canon 8 and Canon 12 in Trent. And yes, that's right. If anyone saith that matrimonial causes do not belong to ecclesiastical judges, let him be anathema. So an ecclesiastical cause is the separation of spouses. It's so it's like in your face, basic, but people just skirt all around it. Mm-hmm. So the new Code of Canon Law, 1983, this is another reason we don't want to throw it out. Not that we can anyway, because we're Catholics, but it's Canon 1401 of the new Code. By proper and exclusive right, the church adjudicates cases which regard spiritual matters. That would be separation of spouses So exclusive right is those that regard spiritual matters or those connected to spiritual matters. Like what are the education rights of parents to children and stuff like that? Like who gets the kids? Canon 1671 of the new code, marriage cases of the baptized belong to the ecclesiastical judge by proper right. So exclusive ecclesiastical judgment of marriage cases, separation cases. A lot of it's, even Humanae Vitae says a lot of correct things about NFP. You can't, it's Pius XII in Midwives contradicts himself. Humanae Vitae does the same contradictions. They'll say you got to have kids, except when you don't got to have kids, basically. But like I said, when you want what you want in that area, not much is going to get in your way. And if the local priest and the bishop and everyone is like, yeah, dude, you and your flat earth stuff, get out of here. That's basically where this message is that I'm saying goes. I think the earth is round, by the way. So that was my overall solution was we've got to educate ourselves and do marriage, kind of govern it yourself almost, because it's like you can't call the cops if the cops don't have any guns and won't enforce the law. You have to have a gun yourself and take care of business yourself.
Mm. Yeah, so that's the truly desolate situation that we're in, that whether these men are valid office holders in the church or not, practically speaking, they are not Catholic teachers, fathers, and
That's
guides.
a good way of putting it.
We
In
can't
practice, you're right. In practice,
de facto sedevacante. We can't actually look to Rome to give us justice.
no, they'll say the exact. I
Court of
think.
law.
Okay, so I made enough noise about this, and one bishop actually wrote to Cardinal Coco Palmerio. That was before the altar boy cocaine party, and they said, "Hey, do you got to get the bishop's permission to divorce?" And he's like, "No, don't worry about it. No." And so it's just more confirmation of this stuff, and it was more wordsmithing. But of course, you can't ask them. You can't get to this stuff. It's you and I can talk and people on the internet, but if you try to get your bishop on the phone, this conversation is over.
And as you said, the greatest victims of all are the children. So in contrast to our Lord,
that's right.
to our Lord who said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me," the hirelings today rebuff the children and allow their lives to be shattered in the secular divorce courts and, in fact, their own marriage tribunals.
There's a quote, from 1955 or something. The Tribunal of Chicago say, "Our children are being massacred in divorce court. This is why you must come to our separation court. And we're going to determine who gets the kids. And if you aren't going to play ball with us, you lose the sacraments." That's why marriage endured, why divorce was stigmatized, and it didn't happen. Okay. Now, when you give everyone communion for divorce, a lot more of it. When any objective sin you reward with communion, it's going to increase, obviously. And that's, so is divorce a sin today? Who knows? I don't know. Ask your priest. He'll say, "We don't recognize divorce."
Yep.
If you have good reason, go ahead. No. Well, I'm thinking of that. Everyone loves to go to the Catechism 2384, which says divorce is a grave offense. But right before that, at 2383, it says if it's the only possible way to protect rights and the kids, you can divorce. Have you heard that before?
I know that the modern catechism is subject to change, looking, for example, at the death penalty. It doesn't say anything about wives being subject to their husbands, which is another major part.
Oh yeah, there's all sorts of problems.
I don't go near the modern catechism.
Okay, well I do, because that's where normies live, and you got to talk to these people who graduated from, like I said, University of Steubenville, and they now work at the family life office at the parish down the street. So these guys are Catholic. Let's talk about what's Catholic right now. And 2383 of the Catechism will say if divorce is the only possible way to protect your kids, it doesn't constitute a moral offense. Legal separation I don't know about England, but every state in the USA has legal separation or equivalent. So there's never a need to divorce ever. That's a whole nother topic. The Matthew 19:9 exception has been changed because of annulment to just mean if the marriage is invalid, you can separate. There's never a cause to divorce. All divorces are grave sin. Every single one. You can separate, but you can never divorce. With the advent of NFP and annulment, that's out the window, because there's nothing wrong with separation at that point. So that was just that's just more of that wordsmithing I was talking about. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, yeah, you can shoot a gun if it's the only possible way, but if it's never if you never need to, you can never shoot anybody. It's just, there's so much confusion out there. But again, if there's nothing to root it in, we are all just kind of, it's a perpetual motion machine of marriage error, unless somebody can kind of. So with people with the faith, when they hear it, they're like, enough people it resonates with. By the way, anything that I say that anyone disagrees with in the comments or wants to talk about or wants more info, I will back all of it up. That's another difference between me and pretty much everyone else. I'll talk to you for a year in the comments if you want. and I will back up everything I say, and I'll answer any questions you have and continue to answer them, rather than just, well, I said this and you're not worth my time, or I can't deal with that. No, I am going to deal with it. And whatever you have to say to me, no problem. You can email me, you can call me. I'm super easy. Have we been digressing too much? You're trying to get through your outline. Are we doing okay?
No, progressing very well. Thank you, Ms. Farrell.
Okay.
I wonder if you saw what the Spanish Bishops' Conference announced in 2020 with regard to marriage preparation. They put forward a new voluntary program called On the Path Together. It's kind of characteristic of liberal Catholicism. It's always a path, always a journey without a clear destination. The new course could last between 2 and 3 years, divided into 12 areas such as communication, fidelity, the beauty of sexuality, and conflict resolution. The course is intended to accompany, prepare, and help young couples towards the matrimonial vocation. So, can you explain, perhaps, Mr. Farrell, to our audience here as to why that is a kind of consistent pastoral view
Sure.
with regard to the new definition of marriage?
You need to perfect your chemistry if you're going to have your marriage last, because the new marriage bond is the personalistic norm. The bond is no longer durable like your baptism. The bond depends on how well we're hitting it off. Okay. So we have to keep strengthening that bond. So we need to really ramp up. So the more marriage prep, the better. That's why they keep throwing more marriage prep at the issue. And if it's all about communication and that I'm going to do a new video coming out. It's going to be called Gay Pre-Cana. It's what it is, man. It's dual headship, mutual submission, and everyone needs to get along. So we've got to work on our relationship. So that marriage is crumbling. What do? Let's throw more marriage prep at the problem with more indefinition. The only thing we need is definition. Mm-hmm. What we don't need is marriage prep. We want less marriage prep. All you need is definition. That's why 100 years ago, no divorce, big families, no marriage prep. Now we have the opposite. So we just keep doubling and tripling down because we can, like I said, we're not going to get rid of our NFP and we're not going to reverse all those annulments. No way. We have no choice but to keep doubling and tripling down on our definition of marriage, which doesn't exist. So we have to have more marriage prep and then more on top of that. Let's have a 10-year marriage prep program. I mean, whatever. So to answer your question, no, I had not heard about that from this. Did you say which group of bishops?
The Spanish bishops.
Yeah. Okay. Spanish, fine. There's probably more of it too. And it's in different places in the USA. If people are going to get married, man, strike while the iron's hot. Have a 2-week marriage prep thing. Mm-hmm. 2 weeks. This is it. Here's your rights. If something goes wrong, here's your canon law on separation. Okay. Kind of like if you buy a TV set with a warranty, if things break, this is who you call. This is what they got to do. They got to say, if someone starts going off the rails on you, you bring this thing to the ecclesiastical court. Otherwise, you're foolish and wicked if you don't. Instead of just simp harder and keep sucking it up and all this stuff. No, you got to get tough. No, a lot of people naturally don't want to. It's like really hard. What if you got a bunch of little kids and your spouse is going sideways on you? You feel like blowing that up? No, you're not even geared that. You're like, let's just try to work this out. Let's get the counselor, anything. It's you. How does it say in the Bible? It's we should act as though we're not. Those who are married should act as though they have no wife, and the wife who is married should act as though she has no husband. So we need to be independent and realize we have this rights contract. And when someone's violating the rights, take it to the ecclesiastical court. So Canon Law 221 is the foundation for that. If you need to get your rights vindicated or defended, you take your problem to ecclesiastical court, which is Matthew 19, I think, where it says somebody, if someone is violating you, you take it to some friends, and if they won't listen, you take it to the church, and if they won't listen, anathema, right? Basically treat them like a tax collector or a Gentile. That's where that's from. You take it to the ecclesiastical judgment. So you've got to know, yeah, when my new TV breaks, I have a warranty. This is where I take it. When my spouse breaks, I take it back to the bishop, not for an annulment, but for an ecclesiastical trial, so we can bring authority in and remedy the problem.
But what if that's putting your marriage sort of in the hands of a group of modernists,
Correct, but it's
men who might not have the Catholic faith.
Whether they have the faith or not, they have the authority. A faithless priest can celebrate consecrate a valid Eucharist. Okay, a hippie priest with tattoos can give you last rites, even though he's off the rails. Okay, so they have authority. They're real. A bad bishop has as much authority as a good bishop. It's the same. So you do want to, if you don't take, number one, you have to take your marriage separation to due process. Otherwise, you're an abandoner yourself. Even if you're innocent as the wind-driven snow, you are a public abandoner if you separate without permission. If you do not pursue due process per 1691 through 96 and 1151 through 55, due process, and by the way, Canon 87 will say no bishop is permitted to dispense with due process. This because it's connected to divine law. Matthew 19:9, if there's you want to separate, the exception is for adultery, and it's adjudicated by ecclesiastical judge only. It's right there in the new code. They've got to take their separation to a liberal bad news bishop, because he is the judge. No one else is. And if you have an open and shut case, my spouse communicates with a 9-iron often. Then you take it to the liberal bad bishop and say, can you tell my spouse they can't do this or not? And that's we're going to remedy. We're going to identify with authority the cause of the problem. The cause of the problem must be named. Otherwise, you just have, well, you got your opinion and your feelings and my feelings, and usually it's the woman's always right, and that's why the perfect courtroom for separation for the new definition of marriage is no fault divorce. It's perfect because we have no fault. So as you know, you heard about the new law in France, the new court case where the guy said, I want to divorce because of you're no conjugal rights. You're not honoring the marital debt. And France says, we agree. You can divorce her for that reason. Okay. Because that's old Catholicism right there. It's still there still there in France, still hanging on by a thread. Then the new Court of Human Rights came in and said, no, there's no more of that marital debt stuff, because you have the right to privacy, your own private life, and all this kind of stuff. So she got the divorce because she didn't like him, not because there's no more marital debt, in other words. And therefore, a covenant of love marriage needs a no-fault separation court, which is why there are no separation courts after the Beatles anywhere, because there's no more marriage rights or contract in practice anywhere in the West. So that's why you got to take things into your own hands as far as this goes. But yes, you're better off going to a liberal feminist bishop than nobody, and you have no choice anyway, or you're just like them, because you're saying, screw authority, I'm my own authority, and you're like, that's ye shall be as gods. The devil works through disobedience and pride. So if you want to stay out of trouble, obey with humility. So my bishop is all kinds of, I pray for that guy every Friday, my rosary, but they're just wild over here. They're probably wild everywhere you are too. I mean, just nuts, the stuff. It's like, where are you? Hello. But they have the authority. The devil knows that, and it's real. So I can't pretend I don't like, they're so nasty, I'm not going to go to them. they're otherwise. What do you got? I'm my own church. And I was starting my own church. You're out. No. Now, I may say some things that you did. Are you going to object a little bit?
Well, it's very mysterious what's occurred to the mystical body, and it's Platonic in that the repudiation of authority from the post-conciliar claimants is something felt right the way through the church and felt through the world as well. This sort of Platonic vitiation of authority, because refusing to govern by law is refusing to be pope. I mean, whether they're valid or not, but it's this. The church is the native home of the rule of law, and so without that rule of law, it's like, as they said, as Balzac said about Louis XVI, when they cut off the head of the King of France, they cut off the head of all the fathers in France. There's a deep, attack that's made of all authority underneath. So I don't know.
I'm sorry.
We don't have a Catholic Pope governing in Rome in de facto that we can look to, and that's felt right the way through the structure of the church. We can only
I could say Pius XII did some un-Catholic things, So, and there's been lots of bad popes, but there's authority is real. We're going through a passion now. It's just tough. It's kind of like there's been lots of bad spouses, but you can't lose your spouse, no matter how bad they get. You can separate if you need, but they're your spouse. It's till death. Okay, but we have a pill for that now. And we don't want to take the bait on the church either. If your bishop or your pope gets really bad, I'm sorry, that's a lot. That's a bridge too far. I can't go there. No. It's all the way to the cross. Otherwise, you got nothing. You're just kind of a form of Protestant. So it's very but it is true. You can point out what's wrong, and you can say they can be material heretics or whatever, but you can't judge them as official heretics. And otherwise, you shall be as gods, and then you got problems. So this marriage stuff, it works through authority, and the authority has been, like I said, it got buried by a giant bulldozer in 1965, and it's under there, and it's going to come back out again. The truth will come back out. But right now, God is allowing, he has plenty of power. He knows exactly, he's allowing this passion to be experienced by all of us. Mm-hmm. And through faith, we see, yes, we have, God is there. He's allowing us to experience the major injustice, the felt banners, all, whatever, there's a list a mile long of stuff, but it's God's church, not our church. So we're going to go where we feel the most vindicated. Sorry, because like I said, you've got to have those 4 marks. Now that is a whole nother debate, and to get it right, that you can, because people feel strongly about that, and that's their hill to die on and stuff, and that can go a long ways too, like SSPX and fun things like that. But when you're going to try to get somewhere with marriage, the powers that be is your local bishop down the street. He's the guy. He controls the annulments and all this stuff, and he doesn't define marriage. He defines marriage illegally. He has an illegal definition of marriage, which is why anyone who can fog a mirror will get the annulment. That's why we've got to realize, like I say, if you have a corrupt police force, you better get a gun, and you better not be afraid to use it, because no one's going to save you, because they don't do that anymore. Since you have a corrupt bishop, as far as his definition, you better know what marriage is and be ready to enforce it to the degree that, so that you enter marriage with somebody who is on the same page as you as far as what it is and what's going to be enforced. If you think you can get married and then when things happen, things go sideways, well, then we'll just talk to our priest or counselor. You're too late. Sorry. And as I mentioned before, people who are married, they're busy doing work, normal stuff, taking care of kids, not combing through all these canon laws and figuring out what they mean when everyone tells them they mean something else. You got to have no life for years on end. to learn what this stuff means, not be normal. Okay. So someone's got to that's why it's good to get this out here. All right. That's why I say, if anyone wants to talk to me or whatever, don't be shy. I'm super easy.
Yes, I can personally vouch for that, Mr.
Good.
Farrell. It's been a great pleasure. We can, as you say, I do certainly agree, we can embrace the passion of the church that we're being called to enter into, and pray that the Blessed Virgin Mary grant perseverance to our marriages, for better or for worse, till death do us part. Are there any final concluding thoughts you might like to leave our audience with?
Oh, probably. Yeah. For better or for worse no longer exists if marriage is the personalist norm, because when things aren't hitting my person how I want, you're incapable of giving me your full self. Because if you could give me your full self, we wouldn't be feeling this way. So you're the problem. No more for better, for worse. Just, I guess my overall theme was marriage is bound by nature, objectivity, legal essence. Okay. So it's the difference between we're going to have brain surgery or we're going to have mind surgery. That's not, you can't define what your mind is legally. So keep marriage in the yes column like it always was: law, nature, finite, objective. Anything else is a flight of fancy into one of unlimited weird places that we discussed earlier. Different ways of trying to have Trinitarian love with your spouse and find that high pinnacle of it, like Christopher West talked about and John Paul II talked about. So I guess that would be it. And just like I said, if anyone wants to reach me, because there's going to be somebody out there who's like, I got to talk to this guy because I got this weird issue going on and I can't figure. You're right. You can't figure it out because you're going to the twilight zone with your normal, and you're just going to get routed and rebuffed. And it's extremely tough and frustrating because you're trying. This is only your marriage. It's only what's going on in your kids, and you can't get any normal from anybody. Okay. So I can help you with that and recourse to the law. Among other things. P.S. There's no canon lawyer will talk to me either. None. I even have a $25,000 offer to prove me wrong about any of this. No one will take the bait. It's largely a political appointment, kind of. They're all, because they work for the bishop, they got to go with the status quo. And if you come out and say what agree with anything I'm saying, their education was bad and they have no job. Their name is mud. So this is why you can't. I'm going to talk to my canonist. There's a handful out there who are okay, but they're behind the scenes or they don't talk. So your general canon law stuff, that's another issue. Okay, well, very good then. I guess you're about ready for bed, huh? I'll catch the rest of the Super Bowl over here. You want to really try to search for the truth of what marriage is, and we're being deceived by basically all voices in even the whole 20th century. Not every single voice, but it started really in the 20th century, like Dietrich von Hildebrand, all those guys, all this, we need to emphasize love. We're not going to make it legal, but we're almost going to with enough words. If I throw enough words at you, you'll be mesmerized. And that now it's almost been in code. So they've taken it to the nth degree. So anyway, that's important for the wife because she's more feelings based. And she's going to try to find some sort of what does John Paul II call it? Betrothed love. That's what he calls it, which is a made up word which means nothing, which means a bunch of feelings. So when they want to try to search for this, no, I'm here. My salvation is through having babies, and your salvation is through work. That's it. And this is where it's not about he needs to make me happy and everything. Well, no, everyone's doing their duty, and the happiness is kind of an inside job, but everything falls into place when you do your obligations. When they're not defined, you don't know what they are exactly, and that's when you start reinventing the wheel, and you guarantee to fall off the tracks at some point because you have your house divided. She's thinking theology of the body, and he is thinking procreation. That's a house divided, and it's just a matter of time. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? What's this NFP, or why are we spacing our? What are you doing? What, and how come you want to work? Whatever. So it's legalized feminism. I didn't articulate everything perfectly, and I'll be able to articulate it more in about 5 years once I pray more and think more and research more. And maybe we'll do another. We'll talk in 5 years, maybe. Who knows?
That's why the restoration of patriarchy is essential, because this whole betrayal of the clergy could just be characterized as one of the largest outbreaks of effeminacy. That right order, that hierarchy, has just been lost.
Yes. That's right. Like I said, once you compromise with nature, your patriarchy goes away. You familiar with Timothy Gordon?
Oh yes, yeah.
He's in trouble because he says NFP is good, right, with Father Ripperger.
Right.
Timothy Gordon is smart. He knows the law, but he's handcuffed. He says he's anti-feminist, but he says the Marriage Act must be unitive. That's what he'll say. But you ask him, what does that mean? He's like, I'm not going to talk about that. We're not going. It's so, because he's part of. He needs a little bit. He's a donor class guy. He wants the donations, and
and it's not the only inconsistency. He has sort of slightly Americanist tendencies, I would say, and in seeing America as a quote unquote Catholic republic rather than the Masonic republic. And
yeah, maybe so. Yeah, the USA is set up for failure because it says, "In God we trust." We're just not going to define what God is. So you define God, and it's the same thing. Till death do us part. We're just not going to define what parting is. There's no definite. So it's just a house divided. So the USA is on a timeline, and that's it. There's no other human nature, and something's going to rise from the ashes on this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Farrell, for your time, and God bless. We look forward to following your work as well. Commend that to my audience. Viva Cristo Rey.
Viva Cristo Rey. Thank you, Theo. God bless.
For those that are interested in supporting my channel and in accessing premium content, please consider joining my locals page via the link that you will find in the description below.